tell folks if they don't, if they can.
Um, Welcome back, everybody. This is the Larimer County Board of Commissioners open house here in the beautiful downtown Poudre Library District's main library. I'm Tom Donnelly. I'm the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners this year. I'm joined by my colleagues on the board, John Cafalis, Commissioner from District 1, and Steve Johnson, Commissioner from District 2. For those of you who might be confused as to why I'm restarting the meeting, it's because we are now going live on Fort Collins Cable Access Television, as well as Facebook and YouTube. Oh, not on TV, just on Facebook and YouTube.
I did my hair.
I was just, yeah, so okay. Well, anyway, thank you to those folks who might be watching this online, and thank you to Fort Collins for seamlessly getting this thing operating. As I mentioned, anyone who signed up for our online county newsletter prior to 7 o'clock was entered into a drawing, and so those folks who might be watching, you should have come. Next time come, because there's a lure of great prizes. So we're going to do a drawing now. Each of my colleagues is going to draw for a prize from our Public Affairs Director, Michelle Bird. And so here's the first prize.
A marijuana garden. No, wait, it's a herb garden.
A Larimer County branded herb garden. And the winner is Commissioner Johnson.
The winner is Lori McDonald.
Lori, where are you? There you are.
How about that?
Congratulations. Wow. And so next, what are we giving away next, Commissioner Cafalis? Water bottle? Ooh, a Larimer County branded aluminum water bottle.
And we all know how important it is to stay hydrated in Colorado.
You bet. Okay, and the winner is? Here we go.
David Sismo.
David.
Oh, David. Hi, David. Congratulations.
Well done. That's nice. Huh? Pretty nice. And then finally, if the commissioners are particularly verbose tonight, you may need this Larimer County headlamp to get home, and that is going to go to. Okay. Oh, Carla Massaro from my hometown, Loveland. There you go. See? Very nice. Good to see you. Okay, so we're now going to enter into our Q&A portion of our meeting. We will have Lorinda Volker, our assistant county manager, and myself both have handheld mics. We all have microphones here, and we will be taking your questions on or comments. If you just want to make a comment, that's fine as well. Suggestions, anything that's on your mind, we welcome it, okay? And so we're going to open this up. If you have questions about the strategic plan, obviously, or comments about that, we obviously would love to hear that. But if you have questions about anything that runs practically the entire gamut of potential issues, you have a question already?
No, I want you to remind people online that are watching, they can ask questions in the comments.
Yes, folks who might be watching online can ask a question, and Michelle will signal us that there's a question at that time, and so we'll accept those questions as well if you're watching online. So without further ado, would either of my colleagues like to make any remarks prior to this? Well, let's get moving. Let's do it. Who has the first question? I know that people do. You asked them to me when I was milling around out there. You can ask. Would you like to ask one, Ms. Rashid?
Well, I don't want to ask.
Or make a comment?
Okay, I'll put it in the form of a question like Jeopardy. Okay. Why is it that all of your publications for the county budget that you're handing out in the back misstate the revenues and expenditures? You use figures, you're comparing apples to oranges, and you have to really look at the footnotes to realize that the sources, the revenues in the budget, $542 million, includes quite a bit of $127 million, which isn't real revenue. And then your expenses don't even begin to cover all the expenses in the county.
It was phrased as a question. Would anyone like to take a stab at it? I thought she was going to ask, why do you insist on putting a picture of yourselves on every one of your publications?
So I might be able to offer a few thoughts on that. And Sidna, I really appreciate the fact that you have taken the time to go through the budget document in great detail and meet with Josh Fudge. Very few people do that. And the budget is very complicated. We mentioned how many different things the county was involved in. It's not an easy document to understand. I can assure you that the figures are accurate in the budget, and don't take my word for it. We submit our budget to the Colorado Department of Local Affairs every year, and they review it. We also are independently audited by an outside independent auditor that verifies the accuracy of the figures. Now, are they confusing? Are they clear? No, they're not. And why is that? We have to follow certain standards of governmental accounting and reporting that are prescribed to us not only by the accountants, but by the Colorado Department of Local Affairs. That creates double counting situations. For example, we may take revenue in, it goes into a sales tax fund, we show that as an appropriation. We may take that sales tax fund and then distribute it to municipalities. That shows as an appropriation as well. That shows up as some double counting in some cases where the revenues look like they're higher. But it's necessary to do that in order to ensure the auditors and the Department of Local Affairs that we're tracking the funds accurately. I think the best thing I can suggest that's probably more helpful than looking through the several hundred-page budget document is, and we try to summarize that in the budget brief, but as you know, whenever you summarize any kind of a complicated document, there are things that are not covered by a summary. That's why it's called a summary. So I think the best thing to do is, I know you have met with Josh, anybody that has questions about our budget. Josh, our budget director, any of our department heads. I can't speak for the other independent elected officials, but I'm sure they would be happy, or someone in their office would be happy to meet with you and talk about specific areas of the budget. But you really, even we need help having the budget explained to us so that we understand it enough to make policy decisions. But one thing about the county folks is they are very accessible to citizens, and they will make time for you to go over any aspect of the budget that's of interest to you. And I think I think that will give you a better appreciation for it. I can assure you, we do not try to mislead people with our budget. As you probably gathered from our presentations, we're very excited about what we do. We're very proud about what we do. We have gone to great lengths to try to be transparent and involve citizens in our process, but budgets are difficult and it's really hard to make them simple. That's the best explanation I can give.
I have a follow-up.
I knew you would.
That wasn't my question.
Oh.
I'm not talking
Let's
about
use a
the
mic.
Okay,
So,
wait, hold on. I'm
yeah.
coming back. We're broadcasting.
Okay, I'm not talking about the budget. I actually have a master's in accounting, so I kind of know, and I've been through everything. I'm talking about your publications.
Right, the summaries of the budget.
You are cherry picking the amounts that you're quoting so that you have, for instance, this budget printout, $542 million in revenue. That is not true at all. And I think, Linda Hoffman, that it does not represent external revenue flowing into the county.
It doesn't completely represent external revenue because in many cases we use fund balances to supplement the external revenue. So that is revenue.
You're double counting the revenue. You have $127.8 million in internal charges, debt proceeds, and transfer. I mean, I wrote you and I've presented, this isn't the first time. And then your expenses that you present, that you cherry pick to present, are $260 million.
So maybe I'll take a swipe at it. So you're absolutely correct, Commissioner. To answer the question, I don't know how we're coming in, and we see, and since the first time I've ever met, asked for 10 years of county budgets, right? We were digging through the file cabinets to try to find them for you, and so no, we do appreciate your insights. You care very passionately about some county issues. And we think you're a great advocate on behalf of those issues. Let me just say a couple things about county budgets and maybe put them in some different terms. So imagine if we're going to pave Alcaney Road or improvements on a section of Alcaney Road. It's one of the busiest roads in incorporated Larimer County. It's a gravel surface. We cannot keep the road together. We have to grade it 5 times more often than any other gravel road surface. So it makes a lot of sense financially to pave that roadway, right? And so we have limited resources. Hopefully, spoke to our public works director to back there, found out how underfunded feel like road maintenance in the county. It was just set aside money for many years on a single project, right? Think of it that way. And so we might put $1 million into a fund for 10 years to build up $10 million to do a section of that roadway. So that's not money that we received one year. It's money that has set in a reserve fund, and then the year that we do the project, we transfer it into our road and bridge fund, right? And it gets led as a contract, and we spend it. So was it revenue from this year? No. Was it revenue from collected over the course of a decade? Perhaps. The same, think of it this way. If we're going to buy a snowplow or a piece of heavy equipment, we'll take money in from your taxes and we'll put it in an equipment replacement fund. And then when the Road and Bridge Department says we're going to buy this plow truck, we'll take the money out of that fund, we'll put it in the Road and Bridge Fund, and they'll buy the truck. So we count it once when it comes into the equipment fund. We count it a second time when we transfer it to the Road and Bridge Department. And that's a requirement. That's a governmental accounting standard that we must meet. So it absolutely is double counted. So there's revenue that's brought in from reserve funds. There's revenue that's moved around, sometimes many times, before it's actually spent. And that does make our budget documents look larger. It inflates our revenue numbers. To try to work around that, one thing we've tried to do is a gross revenue and then sort of a net revenue, which takes out all that double counting. And so to the extent that we try to do that, and to the extent that maybe it is confusing still, we've tried to simplify it, but obviously we always will provide resources to folks who might have questions about that. Who else has a question tonight? Yes, ma'am. Hi.
Hi, completely different question. So you all exposed the goals that you had, and my question is, how do you ensure not necessarily at the end, but while the whole strategic plan is being developed, that all of these goals get synced back or coordinated, because there's obviously quite a lot of common grounds between all of them, so that they don't stay in 3 different silos.
Sure. Who wants to speak to that? Commissioner Falls.
Sure. Thank you for the question. And just to make sure that I understood the question, you were saying that tonight we expounded on 3 overarching goals, and your question was fundamentally, how do we make sure that we're not operating in silos, and that somehow we are integrating those goals together to create one cohesive plan of action? Well, my response to that is this: that each of the objective teams, based on the objectives within each goal, they will be working to develop their portion of the plan, and then ultimately we will all come together and share what we've come up with. And the document is intended to. It wouldn't make sense to present something where there's separation or where things aren't integrated. So that's the plan. The time frame for completing the 5-year strategic plan is is this summer. And so by summertime, we should have a final draft, and there'll be opportunities for community input. But again, the idea is to take those 3 goals, the objectives within those goals, and make sure they all synthesize or integrate together.
Did I interrupt you? I'm sorry. No. And I would ask, the Board of Commissioners actually is charged with establishing the policy for the county, allocating the budgets for our different departments. Our day-to-day management falls to our county manager, Linda Hoffman, and it's ultimately her responsibility, well, actually, to ensure that we have a balanced budget, but also to crack the whip to ensure that our strategic plan moves forward seamlessly in a way that it can be integrated throughout the entire county. So would you like to speak to that a little bit, Linda?
I would, thank you. So we use a fairly simple process. Each of the goals have a steward, and the steward is titled steward because they're not supposed to do all the work. They're supposed to make sure that they are stewarding it and making sure that the work is actually occurring. And then the objective leaders put together a team, and most of the teams will have people from within county government and outside from the community as well. In fact, Goal 2 that deals with programs and services will probably be very heavily weighted for outside community members. And then, though, to Commissioner Kapalis's point, each of those objective teams are putting together a step-by-step work plan of how they are going to achieve that objective within the time frame. The objective leaders meet regularly with the goal stewards and have the council of the executive sponsors. And then quarterly, the goal stewards meet together with me, and we find gaps and overlaps, just like you're talking about. In the last plan, we had several groups who were all very interested in training internal staff about what was going on in other departments, and so we combined those groups across the objectives. And then we report quarterly to the board as a whole. You'll find that each of them are very knowledgeable about their own goal and speak excitedly about it, and it gives them an opportunity to really share what's going on in that part. But we look for those overlaps and try to pull people from teams together if they're working on similar things. It's an issue, and we have a simple process for managing it.
Very good. Hang on one second. We have a Facebook question.
Well, I don't want, we have a couple statements. So I wanted to, in transparency, first we had someone who just said thank you guys for hosting this online so that they could be involved. And then we had another person ask a question that's probably more state related than it is county related, but I'm sure most of you all know that a lot of things that happen at the state level impact us as an arm of this, as the arm of the state. So I'm gonna give you guys the statement if you want to respond to it or not. I think I'll leave that up to you. But an individual online says that if SB 181, which would be Senate Bill 181, goes through, that we might have some impacts to deal with on the county level. And for those of you who don't know what SB 181 is, I will give you all the title of that bill. That is the Protect Public Welfare Oil and Gas Operations Bill. So if you didn't know what SB 181 is, that's the title of that bill. So I just wanted to let you know that there was someone online who thought that that was important, so they let us know.
Very good. And it probably is not the only comment there or question that we'll receive about that tonight, I believe. So, sir, in the back.
Thanks for hosting this tonight as well. And I just, first, my comment is thank you so much for being intentional around public involvement and public engagement. I think you've really demonstrated tonight that you guys are really taking an active role in trying to reach other parts of the county. So I really appreciate that. My question is related to the previous question around process for the strategic plan. And Linda, thank you for kind of highlighting the role of the steward and the role of the community members. My question is related to those work plans developed by the steward. How, there might be some aspirational objectives or tasks or things that come out of those work plans. And is there a process that the county uses for deciding what they fund and what they don't fund around those recommendations in the work plan?
I can.
Okay.
I can tell you how we did it last time. We find that in the first year of the 5-year strategic plan, we spend a lot of effort really honing in on those work plans and making sure that we understand what to do in order to get to the finish line on time. And we don't spend a lot of money in that first year on most of the objectives. In subsequent years, as part of the budgeting process, the proposals that have to do with strategic plan, goals or strategic plan activities will come in what we call service proposals as part of the budgeting process. And the commissioners set targets for each individual department, and we fund those first because we don't want the wheels to go off the bus on our normal services because our eye's not on the ball by looking at one of these stretch goals. So the commissioners will make decisions to fund those core services first, and then we look at the strategic plan asks, and the commissioners allocate funding for last time around, we were pretty fortunate, and we were able to fund the majority of those requests in a timely fashion in order to get to the finish line on all 23 objectives last time around.
One thing I wanted to add to that, I think you were talking about how as we work through the goals, we learn more about them. They may change. New things may come up. New funding opportunities, needs may be identified, and I think Linda's exactly right. The budget process we go through every year affords us the opportunity to be responsive to those. But the other thing I wanted to point out, and this actually happened in the first strategic plan, one of the 7 goals we had then centered around transportation. So we got started on a transportation goal, and then we had the flooding that gave $150 million of road and other associated public improvement damages in the county. So we got a little bit behind on that goal. So we went back after we got a handle on those issues, and we looked at the transportation goal. Meanwhile, we had gotten some input from our Office on Aging Advisory Board that senior transportation was a large problem in the county, not so much within a municipality like Fort Collins or Loveland, but between municipalities or getting to medical appointments, say out to the University Hospital out by the interstate, a lack of transportation there. So we modified that transportation goal, adding a senior transportation element into that, and that developed into a study and some proposals for I guess a facilitated senior call center type situation for ride sharing, which we are currently, I think I don't know if it's operational yet, but it should be very shortly. So my point is, not only can we respond through the budget process, but these goals are not written in stone during the 5-year period of time. If we become aware of new ways to collaborate together or new ways, new things come up within a goal, we can also be responsive to that as well.
Sure.
I'd like to add something.
Oh, I'm sorry, John.
That's okay. I'll be quick, but I appreciate the question. And when you mentioned the word aspirational, I think it's important to keep in mind, as was stated earlier by Tom Donnelly, that this 5-year strategic plan, they're sort of stretch goals, and to try to get us to focus in the next 5 years what's possible, but not to lose sight that these goals are intended, as I understand it, to align with our efforts around updating our comprehensive plan, our master plan, and that's looking at a 20-year vision of Larimer County that ultimately will inform our land use code. So from my perspective, not having the experience and the knowledge that my colleagues have, it seems to me that not all of these goals would necessarily involve money. It could be leveraging resources. It could be saying that, for example, if we're looking at a development that might involve tax increment financing, and we want to make sure that the residential portion of that has affordable housing, that we can encourage that kind of leveraging or collaboration. It might mean, for example, and I focus on this affordable housing thing a little bit, that's why I guess I'm doing that. The Downtown Development Authority has a property that they're looking at developing an affordable housing project, and it might mean, if we all agree, that the county might not have a direct role in that, but we would offer a letter of recommendation, a letter of support for that kind of thing to help facilitate those kinds of things to happen.
Good point.
Is that
Good
okay?
point.
Thank you,
Perfect.
Commissioner.
Yeah, that's true.
My question's around water, and I'm wondering, if you have any plans in the new strategic plan to acquire more water sources, buy up more farms, and then for the Malchow farm, I'm wondering what the water sources are, if it's CBT, ditch rights, et cetera, and when you do lease it, who are you leasing it to?
That's a lot of questions. So, yeah, absolutely. Todd, you want to come up here? Maybe you could talk about it too with me. Absolutely, I think that exploring policies that would allow us to do some water sharing agreements are really something that's in the strategic plan. Malchow Farms, as you mentioned, is a great example of what we can really do. I mentioned that earlier, $9 million purchase, of which $6 million was water. That was a combination of of CBT water and some handy ditch water as well. CBT water is very, very valuable. Colorado Big Thompson water is very valuable because it can be transferred fairly easily around the district boundary of Northern Water. And so our agreement was with the town of the city and county of Broomfield. That's our partner in that water sharing agreement. But we hope in the future that we can get Fort Collins and Loveland and Berthoud to participate in those agreements as well. And I think the secret there was somebody had to do it first. Somebody had to take a little bit of a chance and really try it to see how it's going to work. And we think it's going to work swimmingly, no pun intended. But we expect that this will be the model going forward as far as water sharing. And did you want to talk about this at all? Go ahead.
That was a great summary.
Okay.
Can I say something about that?
Yeah, Commissioner.
So I don't think Larimer County will be a large player in water purchases and water acquisitions compared to a municipality. We don't run a utility to provide water, so we wouldn't have the need for large quantities of water that a municipality would. This particular opportunity came as a result of our open lands tax money. One of the goals of the open lands, obviously, it's preserve open space, preserve wildlife habitat, preserve views, some recreational opportunities. But one of the goals that I'm really excited about is to preserve farmland and preserve opportunities, especially for young farmers, to engage in agriculture, which is very difficult proposition in Larimer County. So I think there might be, hopefully, more of these smaller situations where we do have open space that has water on it. This was kind of the first one, and we've done 50,000 acres of open space preservation already, so this was the first one. So I don't think it'll be a huge thing, but I think there might be particular spots where it can fit the goals of the open space program and sales tax ballot language and assist in some of those goals, but probably not like you would see with a municipality.
Jeff?
Jeff Jensen, this question is mainly for Commissioner Johnson.
You're not allowed to pick.
In November, the citizens of Larimer County voted in the Behavioral Health Initiative 1A, and I'd like you to speak just a little bit and update. A lot of things that were spoken about during that process was the accountability and the transparency and the oversight of that whole process to the citizens of Larimer County in the next 20 years. Can you speak to where that sits today and where that's headed in the next year and 2 years as we move forward, to just kind of update everybody where that sits?
Sure, I'd be happy to. So what's all happened with the mental health sales tax money that we passed in November? We probably, in the next week or two, are going to start to get our first dollars of that money, because it started January 1st. The books close, I think, sometime in February, and then the state gets us the money around the first part of March. So the purpose of the money was kind of twofold. One was to get distributed services out into the communities of Larimer County. The second leg of the stool was to provide for a inpatient facility centrally located in the county that would kind of be a hub for meeting unmet services in the community, and that could support the distributed services out in the community. So we're just now collecting the money, but as far as the facility, what we're doing is we're going to save up and pay for that with the sales tax money that comes in, so we don't have to borrow for that. So during the first year, this year, we will be saving up a large portion of the sales tax money. We'll be designing the facility. We will be contracting with the provider so they can have input into the facility, so we don't have somebody coming into a facility we've built and I wish it was different. So that will give us a good design for the facility. Probably construction of the facility will start in 2020, and we're hoping the facility opens in 2021. So that's that leg of the stool. The distributed services, what we've done, what the master plan that was available during the campaign said, that in the first year there would be $1 million of the sales tax money reserved for services out in the communities, and I believe $2.5 million, I think, in the second year for distributed services. So what we have done is we've appointed a policy council of representatives of each of the municipalities in Larimer County, myself as one commissioner, and we've just recently appointed 6 citizens to serve on that policy council. Is that right? 5 citizens to serve on that policy council. They will be providing a recommendation to the commissioners on how that distributed money should be spent, what services should be done in the community first. So where do they get their information? We appointed 27 people to a technical advisory committee. These folks are providers, practitioners in the community, citizens, in several cases, individuals that have used mental health or behavioral health or substance abuse services in the community. They're the technical experts. So one of the questions we will be asking them is, what is the low-hanging fruit? What projects are ready this year to be provided in the community? And they'll be reporting that to the policy committee, who will be discussing it, and they'll be making a recommendation to the Board of Commissioners very soon. We will go out to requests for proposals, probably RFPs on those things, and we'll probably see services in the community start probably in the fall, I would estimate.
Mr. Falls.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tom. And Steve deserves a lot of credit. He's worked very hard on this. The only thing I wanted to add was that we're very mindful as the commissioners and all these various the Technical Advisory Committee, the Behavioral Health Policy Council, of needs in urban communities and needs in rural communities. And as an example, just this past Monday in one of our work sessions, we had the Ag Advisory Board, the Larimer County Ag Advisory Board, present to us about the rural mental health crisis. And I suspect we all have an understanding that folks who work the land, farmers, ranchers, for lots of reasons can be dealing with a lot of difficult situations, commodity prices, water issues, and all of that. And so there are serious needs out there, and that's something we need to be very mindful of and very intentional about. And I think that's what making sure that we're as inclusive as possible to see what we can do to help address some of those needs in places that are more isolated. Telehealth, for example, is a tool that might be able to help bring services, whether it's medical or physical or behavioral health, to places like Red Feather Lakes, for example, or places up north. So that's something we're also taking into serious consideration.
Well said. Any other questions? Oh yeah, there's one back there, and then I'll come to you first.
Thank you. A question that I have is, Montava is in the process of being approved through the city, and the next few years is going to have a tremendous impact on northeast Fort Collins. About a mile or so of the property that will be affected through infrastructure development, utilities, roads, water and sewer, are on the line between the city and the county. What has the county done to work with the city to keep abreast of what's going on with that development?
Great. So Montava is a large residential subdivision. 860 acre.
West of Anheuser-Busch.
Okay.
All the way north to Richards Road.
Okay. From.
South to Mountain Vista.
Okay.
And west to Turnberry.
Okay. So
Turnberry extension.
Turnberry to Mountain Vista to Anheuser-Busch to Richards Lake Road is the bounds of this development.
4,600 homes.
Wow. What are you, the real estate agent? You know a lot about this. 4,000. I'm repeating it so folks who are watching online can hear. 4,600 homes.
It's going to be huge. It's going to be a small city within a city.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And so you need to be involved and find out what's going on.
Yeah.
Who's
And
your liaison? Who's going to be the person that's going to keep you informed of what's going on?
Okay.
Yeah. So we have a planning department, a building department, all of those types of infrastructure related departments in the county. They work closely with their counterparts in all of the municipalities. One thing that the county government tries to do with every single municipality within, and there are 8 municipalities either wholly or partially in Larimer County, is we try to meet with them regularly and establish what we call growth management areas, okay? And so that is supposed to be the boundary into which that community will grow in a 20-year window. And once we establish and agree as to where those boundaries are, we typically perpetuate that with some type of intergovernmental agreement, essentially a contract saying, this is where you say you will grow to, you won't go this way, you'll go this way, you won't go into this community's area. It works, sometimes that works, sometimes it doesn't work as well. And the idea behind that is really what you're talking about, to facilitate smart planning and growth, right? So which roads are going to need to be arterial roadways? Where are we going to need to plan to have sewer lines and water lines? And how are we going to make sure we can afford people access? So a huge development like that will result in a tremendous amount of traffic, for instance. So answering those questions is very important. You're absolutely right, and we work collaboratively. Actually, I think the chairman of our planning commission is even here today, and he'd be happy to talk to you about that as well, I'm sure. And so growth issues are always challenging. They're always difficult. Counties we don't have much ability to influence where a city annexes, for instance. In fact, we have none, except through our growth management process. So we work with them. But for instance, a town like Johnstown, for instance, they don't even have an agreement with us. That's why they have grown all the way up to Highway 34 and in Loveland, and so
there may be an
yeah.
exception here.
Okay.
That the edge
Mike.
of the
All
western.
right. Yeah. If you're going to talk, I was going to restate it, but that's fine.
Okay.
There may be an exception here in that the western edge of the development and the eventual construction is the section line between the city and the county.
Mm-hmm.
And therefore, underneath that are water supplies, wells, electrical, gas lines. You gotta get involved and know what's going on.
Yeah, that's really important. The other thing that's I think really important for folks who live in that, and I'm assuming you're a resident of that
Adriel Hills.
Okay, Adriel Hills. Yeah, we know your neighborhood well. Another thing that's really important for folks in that area is maintaining true communities. So to ensure that Fort Collins doesn't grow into Wellington, doesn't grow into Timnath, and we don't become like the Denver metro area where it's Thornton, Commerce City, Denver Metro, whatever, And so community separators are really important, and that's something that the board is very actively engaged in, is making sure that we actually have some set aside so that we do maintain the integrity of our individual communities, and from a land use perspective. And I think that a great example of that, it predates any of us, even and you might be surprised because we all look so old, but Longview Farm between Loveland and Fort Collins is a great example of the county actually stepping up, preserving some farm ground to serve as a community separator between Loveland and Fort Collins, so that the two towns didn't just grow together. I'm from Loveland. I've lived there for 25 years. And I don't want to live in Fort. I like Fort Collins. I like all you folks, but I don't want to live in Fort Collins. So I'm real grateful that commissioners that came before us took that kind of action, and that's all part of our planning process. So yeah, absolutely, we're very engaged in land use issues. In fact, the three of us just took a nice van ride around northern Larimer County to look at associated land use issues that have occurred over time. What's worked well? What maybe hasn't worked? What were some of the unintended consequences of some of our development decisions in the past, and what could we do to maybe make that better in the future? It's all informing Number one, a comprehensive plan. The county is going through a comprehensive land use plan revision right now. Do you have a question, or somebody else has a question? Okay. A comprehensive land use plan revisions right now. We're in the process of that right now to really look at what's our vision. It's like a 30,000-foot view of how do we want our community to look? How do we want it to grow? What do we want it to look like when in 30 years from now? That will be followed by a land use code process that we'll go through and look at our land use code and see what types of changes and things like that need to occur there to really to kind of match not what was going on in the county 20 years ago, but what's going on now, and try to make sure that the county regulations can really move seamlessly into the future. And so we're doing quite a bit of work on land use on the land use front. Commissioner Johnson, you wanted to add?
Yeah, I saw Todd Blomstrom come forward, and a lot of the consultation and referrals will occur between the Fort Collins planning staff and our planning staff and our engineering staff, and we may not be aware of that until, or if it comes to a hearing before us, or our staff may come to us with a policy question or may want us to be involved. So I don't know, Todd, if you're familiar with what kind of interaction at the staff, because that's what would happen first, and that's, very important. So you might know what staff exchanges you've had on this particular project at this point.
So Commissioner Donnelly, you hit so many of the high points there with the growth management area and community separators. But one element that I wanted to mention is we have monthly coordination meetings between county staff and Fort Collins staff. And each month there's an agenda, and we're talking about the various projects that are coming up so that there is a monthly coordination with those issues. Montava has been a topic on the agenda for some time, as you can imagine. There's land use interface issues, there's traffic, which is a really serious challenge that we're looking at. So people like Mark Peterson, our county engineer, and his staff are meeting with Fort Collins engineering staff, as well as our planning staff is meeting with their planning staff in these monthly meetings. And they're talking about those projects well in advance. So it's not just sort of that last minute referral, you've got so many days to review and comment. There's an ongoing dialogue with these projects.
Yeah. And just maybe as just an aside, kind of off subject, but you imagine the regional transportation issues that could result from a really large scale development like that. Fort Collins, they're very proud of the things they do, and they do a great job. They're the best in the county or in the region at one other thing as well. 50% of the people in Fort Collins actually work in Fort Collins. They don't leave Fort Collins for work, but that means 50% do actually drive outside of their community for work every day. In my hometown of Loveland, I'm one of them. 75% of the people who live in Loveland work outside of Loveland. Like, I go to the courthouse, right? A lot of the time I do. Some days, right, Linda? When's your review? Is that coming up? But when you get to some of those small communities like Wellington or Berthoud, or even across the line in Weld County and Milliken or Johnstown, 90% or 95% of the people who live in those communities, they drive outside of their community for work every single day. In fact, I was just at a meeting of our workforce development boards, Larimer County's Workforce Development Board and Weld County's Workforce Development Board, that really looks at workforce issues and how to prepare our labor force for the future economy and strategies that we should employ. And a gentleman from Weld County stood up and he said that I don't remember what the terminology was, commuters, where they were the third largest segment of the Weld County economy. I mean, I suppose behind energy and agriculture, right? The third largest segment of their economy was people who work outside of Weld County and drive back in and bring their paychecks home with them. And so we truly have a regional economy, and that requires regional transportation networks. Our issue frequently is that development occurs in the city, and those folks use our county roads. I mean, if they want to go visit our open spaces, we want them to. But those are county roads frequently, and so we want to make sure that we're able to also address the impacts of growth outside of the city. I mean, everybody knows they want to be able to drive to Old Town and go to a restaurant or get a beer or whatever, but sometimes they don't think about, I want to drive up to Red Mountain open space and take a hike, and the county needs to make sure that we can provide service as well. And so those are the kind of things we look at. Now, I will say this, and I'm not trying to poke anybody or anything, but There's an occasion Commissioner Johnson and I had a few years ago when Wellington proposed a growth boundary that was very, very large. And it encompassed a lot of working dairy farms, for instance, a lot of folks who are still in production agriculture, and that's not always as pastoral as we might think, right? There's frequently a lot of manure. I didn't point at you and say manure. I didn't mean that, George. There's manure. They might bale hay all night long. There might be who knows what. There's impacts. It's not always just pastoral fields and things like that. Some agricultural production is fairly intensive use, and so some of those folks brought to our attention that, hey, we don't think this is really a legitimate growth boundary for Wellington to influence land use. It's much too large. The town grew this big in the first 150 years. It's not going to grow 4 times that big in the next 20. And so the board did something somewhat unheard of, and we did not reach an agreement with them at that time. Now, hopefully, they're coming back to the table. We promise to work in good faith with them to identify real boundaries for their growth management that they can actually truly grow into, that they can begin the process of determining where their infrastructure needs are going to be, and we promise to work with them. But there have been instances where we said this is not sustainable, nor is it appropriate for county residents. A long-winded answer. Yes, sir.
I forgot the question.
Thank you. As a member of the Science Advisory Board, I would be remiss if I didn't ask a question about climate change. So if the commissioners could grade the county A, B, C, D, or F, how would you grade the county's readiness to respond to increased frequency of fires, droughts, and floods?
I talked so much last time. I'd like you guys.
Sure. I'll give you my opinion, and then since you're the expert, I want you to tell me what you would grade us. Whenever you grade, I used to be a teacher in high school and at CSU, and whenever you have the opportunity to grade yourself, there tends to be a little bit of grade inflation there. But one of the things,
straight A's.
What? Yeah, that's
On everything.
top of my class. One of the outcomes of going through 2 of the worst natural disasters in the county's history is that we have the best emergency preparedness department, readiness, collaboration with our other municipalities, our other responders in the community of anyone in the state. And we, a year or 2 ago, had a special session with our emergency service response department specifically on this issue, and brought in some national experts on climate change. What will that do to vegetation patterns? What would that do to forest fires? What would that do to runoff? And it's pretty startling, actually. But I think, in my opinion, it's hard to know whether you grade yourself on how the other communities are doing. If it was how the other communities are doing, I think we'd probably get an A, because I think we're better than any other community in our readiness to respond to natural disasters, which will be worse as a result of climate change. There's no doubt about it. If you grade yourself as to where the perfect standard of are we exactly where we want to be, regardless of what other people are doing, we might get a little bit less than an A. Maybe a better question is for you, not only what you would grade us at, is what additional steps do you think, you don't have to answer tonight if you don't want to, I know your committee might talk about this, but where are there gaps in our ability to respond that you think we need to address? I would be interested in what you think about those 2 things.
Putting me on the spot, thank you.
When's your appointment up, by the way? We want to know.
We're paying you, not me. Compared to counties regionally along the Front Range, a lot of counties do have climate adaptation resilience plans, and that's something that the county may be missing and may consider into the future.
Okay, thanks. So what was our grade? You didn't give us a grade.
I agree with you. I think we're doing really well.
Okay, thanks.
And I would agree on the disaster emergency infrastructure that we've developed, I would give us an A as well for all the reasons that Steve Johnson mentioned. We've done a very good job of doing what we can about prevention, mitigation, recovery, resiliency. So all of that is really good. I think we have work to do, and that is one of my priorities, and that is to develop some type of climate action plan that would help protect what I think we all share in common, and that is the clean air, clean water, clean land. And so that's something that with the Environmental and Science Advisory Board and with others, maybe we can come to some agreement on what components of that, because there are economic implications as well as public health implications. For example, when we talked earlier in the strategic plan about community health, community well-being, developing a metrics, a tool, the Colorado Health Institute has come up with a tool to look at risk factors related to public health, and I think that's something that the ESAB and others, we should be exploring that to see if that might be a proper tool up here.
Yeah, and I would just tell you personally, I was more of a C student myself, so you kind of get what you pay for, I guess, with me. Maybe I would answer that in a slightly different way, and not specifically related to climate change, but maybe related to pollution. And the county has, as I think my colleagues have both mentioned, a very vigorous county health department that's charged with air quality, water quality, sanitary sewer runoff, and things like that. We have a number of, and I know there's some folks here from that area southwest of Berthoud, that kind of rural area there outside of the Berthoud town limits. In the 70s when Boulder, wouldn't allow large lot rural subdivisions any longer, a lot of those subdivisions pushed into Larimer County. And those were kind of, could have a horse or whatever for folks who commuted to IBM and Ball and all those companies in Boulder County. They still had a fairly short commute, but could have kind of that land use property that they sought. So we have a number of those large lot county subdivisions. A lot of those were developed with independent like septic systems and small plants that were charged with treating their sewage and discharging frequently into the rivers, always into the river, the Little Thompson. So as I said, this isn't about climate change, but it's about something we've done that I think is very helpful to mitigate pollutants and things like that. So the EPA has changed regulations, and they do every decade or so, and so they've been concerned with things like mineral deposition into the water supply and things like that. I don't think there would be very many county health departments that would have had as vigorous of a response as our county health department. I think most health departments would have said, well, you guys figure this out. You're discharging, you're either gonna have to stop flushing or get porta potties, I don't know. But the county health department really went above and beyond to help those folks work with the state, find some funding to do some studies, help them figure out a means to implement sometimes taxation of their own communities to build new plants. There were some instances where we were able to foster some collaboration between, for instance, the town of Berthoud and this neighborhood to hook into the Berthoud municipal system. So we have a great health department that I think they're kind of unsung heroes. Back there, there's some of them. There's one of them. She's smiling. She's never heard a compliment like that before from the commissioners. They really, I think, go above and beyond to work on those fronts, and that's everything from land use applications to water treatment to even these more bigger global issues like climate change. I think we have great people working on a lot of those fronts. I don't know. Oh, wait, George, let me get you in a minute. We do have a question on Facebook.
We do have a fairly simple question on Facebook, so I don't think it'll quite take such an elaborate answer. So
you have no idea.
Wishful thinking.
And I will note that it's 7:55. So Judith is first, she gives a nice compliment. Kudos.
Okay.
Actually,
It was 9 last year.
It used to be 9.
Yeah.
Now it's 10.
And I know there are some folks here who've taken it. It's a great program. It's one night a week for 10 weeks. It's totally free. We'll even give you a dinner.
Is
steak, lobster. No, not anything. No, but it's a great overview of the things the services the county really provides. So I'd encourage everyone here to sign up for the next class. And,
Yep, we do it every spring, and we typically open up applications in February. So usually
Yeah.
the month of February is when we take
and
applications.
so sign up for our newsletter and you can get reminded.
Yep.
It's about 30 to 40 people. We try to limit the size, so it's very hands-on. You learn a tremendous amount about county government. George, you're going to be the last question. Make it a good one.
Okay, it's a policy in Larimer County on most everything you don't unless somebody will complain. Yeah? Can you take it from there and say what it might be like in the future?
So you're talking about code compliance types of issues.
Yes.
We operate on a complaint-based code compliance system, and I think maybe for a couple reasons. Number one is enforcement. We don't have a lot of agents that go out and check your property to make sure that you're not violating county code is one, and so I think by maintaining a complaint-driven system, we probably limit the amount of work that those guys have to do. The other thing about it, I think, pragmatically for me, there are parts of the county where people have different standards of what they think their neighborhoods should be allowed to look like. And I hate to pick on these guys, but if you go down to Campion is kind of, it's just south of Loveland there. It's between Loveland and Berthoud. We had somebody complain about some outdoor storage, but every house on the block had like 10 cars sitting in the backyard, and they don't call on one another because they all kind of, well, I'm going to fix that up when I retire or whatever. And so we don't want to be proactive and go out and bust up the neighborhood when everybody is sort of supportive of how it's kind of developed. But at the same time, we do have codes and rules for a reason. We do have junk vehicle ordinances and things like that. Heck, the county just tore down a house southeast of Loveland that was had building code violations, and actually when we went in and tested it, it had significant methamphetamine contamination, and actually turned out to be way better for many reasons to just totally tear that home down. But yeah, it's a tough issue because sometimes people don't want to have retribution. They don't want to call out their neighbors because of what they might get back. But we think that system has worked pretty well, and I think for like I said, I think it's probably the most pragmatic solution that we could come up with at this time. And if you have a specific case, always call your commissioner. In this case, it'd be Commissioner Kafalis, and he'll get on the compliance, get them to clean it up. Right? You guys want to say something real quick?
There is one small minor exception to that occurs not very often, but if there is an immediate public health risk and our code folks, as they're going around, notice it, they will take action in that situation. But we don't want them driving around, looking for somebody that left a trash can out for, past a day late or something like that. So the complaint process tends to bring the more serious ones to us in a more efficient way to use our staff.
Yeah, and the other issue is with businesses. If someone starts an illegal business in the county where it's not zoned, for instance, we don't want that person to invest a bunch of money into that business when it may be illegal. So we will be proactive on business uses, typically to try to help that property owner, and they can, if there's a land use solution for them, we'll help them navigate that and things like that. So yeah, public health risks and business uses, we're proactive on code compliance. On residential uses, we run a complaint-based business. Folks, I want to give my colleagues just a moment to thank you for your time, but I want you to know from the bottom of my heart how much we appreciate you coming out this evening. I know there were many things you could have done with your evening. You could have stayed home and watched, Dancing with the Stars or something, but instead you chose to spend it with us, and that truly means the world to us. And I know I echo my colleagues will echo that sentiment. I want to tell you, all the folks who watched online, I don't know if you can see how many people there were, but maybe you don't want to tell us. Oh, okay. So it was vigorous online participation. I want to remind you that there are individual commissioner community meetings. I think Commissioner Kafal spoke about that earlier. Those to find out more information about those, you can always go to the Larimer County website. You can follow us on social media, Facebook and Twitter. Even if you're an old-fashioned page turner, we even advertise in newspapers, so you can find out what we're up to there. We want you to be engaged. We really appreciate engagement of citizens, and please know that even if we're not in perfect alignment with what you think, that we hear you and we care about your participation in our process, and I think that we're all the better for it. So thanks again. We want you to stay engaged with us, and I want to give my colleagues a few minutes to say goodbye as well. Commissioner Kafals.
Thank you. I don't have much more to add other than just thanks. Just to reinforce what Commissioner Donnelly said and to really express our genuine appreciation for taking the time to be here. Democracy, representative democracy is made better when more folks participate. So this is really wonderful. Please spread the word. The next one of these will be in 2 months. We have our own community meetings. And the only other thing I would add is that in addition to all of the various things, social media, the county newsletter, the electronic newsletter, which comes out once a month, I'm still continuing to do what I call my accountability report, and some of you received that, and the intent is to complement what the county's doing, and it's not focused on any political stuff, but it's focused on county work, updates, some of the policy stuff, but it also provides information about community events. So it's a little bit different. Some of you get it. If you don't get it, you can, for now, email me, and we'll get you onto that email list as well. Thanks.
So a few things. I want to thank you for being with us as well, and thank you for letting us have a little bit of fun with each other. You may have noticed that we tease each other and all that, and we, unlike city councils, they meet maybe once a week, a couple times a month, work together all day long, every day. This is a full-time job, so we have a little bit of fun doing this, but we do respect each other's contributions and inputs and all of that. We are very responsive to citizen comments as well. We've had quite a few pretty controversial land use hearings recently, and you may have noticed one of them went through 7 or 8 hearings, and we had hundreds of emails about that. And I think if you talk to those citizens, I think they will tell you that we responded to their concerns and we listened to what they had to say. And we can't always agree in a diverse community with different opinions, but I think one thing this board does is it is very open, it is very accessible, it is very transparent. We do our very best to do that, make things as clear as possible, and we do listen to what folks have to say. I'm sure all of us have different ways that we like to receive information. I really like to use email. So you can email all 3 of us by just emailing bocc@larimer.org. We all get those emails and we all read them. I like emails because if there's a question that I can't answer, which frequently happens, I can forward the email to the staff person that has the correct answer and get back to you. So thanks for being here. Finally, I would say, of all the levels of government, federal, state, local government affects our daily lives more than any other. We don't often realize it, but it does, and it has more of an impact on what our community is going to look like in the future, and there's more opportunities in local government for all of us to have a voice in changing the direction of our community than any other level if we take advantage of it, and I appreciate you guys doing that tonight.
Very good. And the board is adjourned.
Thank you. Good job. Yep. Good work, man.